to do that. And I'm going to put the fluffy microphone on because I believe we're being filmed. Wonderful. All right?
Yep.
Go. And just before I start, Marilyn, how long am I talking for? Really? I've got 4.5 hours of slides here. Come on. I will have to speed through it. Right, so we're going to go very quickly through this. Right, so you all know where that is. This is actually, we could probably make that bigger, Brad, but it doesn't matter. Anyway, you know all that is. That this is the south front of the palace. Everyone knows this Baroque palace, but a lot of people know that bit around the palace. They talk about the formal gardens and what have you, and a lot of people don't venture out. So the idea is that we're trying to encourage people to venture out further. We're trying to get people to venture out further into the garden and enjoy the garden more. A lot of our visitors tend to just congregate around the palace and see those bits, and they don't really get much further. So the idea is we really want them to go further. So if you flick along for me, Brian.
Sorry.
If it cuts down trees, cuts grass, that sort of thing, we're great with it. This sort of thing, I'm with Brian on this, to be honest. There we go.
Yes.
There, right. Wonderful. Now, this is the entrance as you come in now. We call it the zigzag. Sorry. And we built a new rockery there, or a new terrace there. Most of the stone came out of the lake from the dredging project, and it replaced a sort of totally out of place wildflower bank, which just didn't work in that area. The juxtaposition was completely wrong. You've got a wonderful formal Baroque palace up there, and then wildflowers. Yes, we are about wildflowers, but not that close to the palace. So the idea was that we try and create something that works and also retains the bank. And we had all this wonderful stone left over. And then right at the back, those tall trees you can see up there are holm oaks, and they look very much like olive trees. So I thought, let's think about doing ourselves a sort of Mediterranean hillside. So we've got olive trees backing. We put the stone in. Now the stone is this wonderful warm honey stone that you can see, and that will generate the heat into the plants, and we'll show a picture of that in a minute. The other thing we did was put the retaining walls up there on the bank and took the steps out. The steps were there so it makes it quicker for people to get up and down the slope, but that's not fair. If you're in a wheelchair, you should take the same amount of time as anybody else. And these gardens are not about rushing around. Let's face it, these gardens are about enjoying the walk, as it were. It's not about bagging this garden. A friend of mine works at Sissinghurst down in Kent, and their average dwell time for their visitors is 40 minutes. Now, this is just not right for us. We should have people here for longer and enjoying it for longer. Anyway, so this is phase 1. Phase 2 puts stone into those banks there because they're slipping as well, very similar to that. And then another stone wall there, and then more of this sweeps around the hillside. This becomes a rockery, and various other bits of obs, which is why all the spare stone is there when you come down the steps. Anyway, so if we flick along for me, Brian. Wonderful. This is the rockery in May, early May, so it's just planting up. You've got a lot of things like cistus, cytisus, rosemary, lavender, junipers, all those lovely Mediterranean smelly plants that we all love and enjoy when we go on holiday to the Med. And it's a really warm, sunny spot, and they're getting away really well. I think we weeded it today, and it's looking quite fresh. And that bit of rain we've just had is absolutely perfect, so which is wonderful. Right, anyway, so let's click along. One more for me, Brian. There we go. So we go to the top water terrace that you all know. It's a bit of a poor image, I know, but it's from the top of the palace looking down. This is in its first inception. And what I really love is just how tiny these hedges are and how tight they are. If you look at it now, they've all expanded way too much. So we are going to take it back to that. We have got the dreaded caterpillar. It has arrived this year. We are spraying tomorrow. It won't stop it. It will stop it for this year, and it will keep coming. So eventually we're going to end up replacing a lot of those hedges. And you can just about see it. Just about there, the tiny little bump in that fountain. If you go down to that sort of lower water terrace now and look at that first fountain, there is a rock in the water. That's that rock, and on top of that rock should be a stone with a snake on it. And the river god on that, I don't think I've got an image of it, but the river god looks towards the snake because the snake represented greed and avarice. And so it should go back. So when you look and you think, why is that odd little stone there? That's why it's there. When I arrived, the stone was shoved under the fountain, and the snake rock was just sort of dumped. And nobody really knew where it was supposed to be, but that's what it represents. So that gives you an idea. This is the early 1900s. Killy Duchenne design. Hopefully we'll flick down to the next one now, Brian, for me. No, we don't, sorry. This is the Duke and Duchess in about 1950. And what I love about this is I use a lot of these black and white pictures to sort of give me the sort of inspiration of what we're going to do. And I'm not looking at the people, I'm looking at what's behind, and you'll see that in a moment. But what I really love about this, I looked at this picture with somebody and they said, that's definitely the Duke and Duchess. And this is Duchess Mary at the front. You know it's the Duchess Mary because she's got a cigarette on the go and the Duke's there. Wherever the Duke was, she was there. And in many ways, she was the power behind it. So she took the decisions and he just sort of was a bit of a figure. So that's one of the things I love about the sort of image and the history of it. And if you see this picture rather than on a big screen like this, there's a small bump just there. And that's that little bit of stone I was telling you about. So it was supposed to be there. But what I love is the difference of the columns and what have you, the conifers behind. And we've gone back to that. If we click to the next one for me, Brian. There we go. So this is just looking down across the water terrace. And you see we've replaced with these little Italian junipers. They were box cones that you may remember. They were all misshapen. They looked a bit like the sorting hat of Harry Potter. They were all different sizes and what have you. And this area is about symmetry and design. And we'd lost that. You can go and buy box cones like that and about that height from Waitrose. Surely that's not right. You know, surely we should have something that really makes people stop and look. So we've dropped these junipers in. It gives height and it also accentuates the height of the obelisk on top, and that's what it's leading your eye, and it's working as it should be. We also took the roses out on this top terrace because they were just deer food. And also we have a rose garden or a rosarium, which we'll cover a bit later on. So you don't dilute it by putting roses in different places. You have a rose garden, you have a rosarium to show off roses. So we've taken them out, we've planted the box around to put the formality back, and we've dropped a load of purple cannas in there for this year. And we're trying to just sort of change the feel in that area. And it does work, I feel. I'm sure there's a difference of opinions. From there, we travel up the slope and we go along one, Brian. Wonderful. And we get to Churchill's Walk. Now, this is March, and it's a great point to illustrate how many daffodils we put in every year. We put about 60 to 70,000 individual daffodil bulbs in every year throughout the garden. The reason being is, over the years, the daffodils in the garden had declined beyond saving, and this is mainly due to being constantly mown, constantly driven on top of, and constantly squashed. So actually, you know, when you start losing them, we should be putting them back, but we'll cover that in a bit. So this is Churchill's Walk just here, and the colour that's given to that area now. If you walk along there through there now, the daffodils are finished, but what you'll see is an image in a minute of just how it looks once you leave your daffodils. We click to the next one for me, Brian, and there you go. This is looking back through. And what you can see are these lovely little purple alliums. We put 4,000 alliums through that area. And it's a brand new border that we created through there, because when I arrived, what I witnessed in my walks around, because I'm very fortunate, I get the opportunity to just walk and enjoy the garden almost as a visitor in order to develop of how it should be. And I noticed that most people walked to the temple, read the plaque on the temple, looked up the walk, saw Churchill and just kept walking. They didn't actually walk through it. You know, and that's the idea of these spaces, to get off the beaten track, get off where all the vehicles go and walk through. So we cleared the grass along the edges. We put in double herbaceous borders, which are almost symmetrical on either side. Planted it up last spring. It had a hard spring because it was very dry as well. And it's just starting to come through. And actually, it's going to stand about yay high, and it'll just dance very gently in the breeze as you walk through it. And it is making people walk through and actually appreciate it. And we are starting to find that people are asking us what plants are, which is what we want. I talk from my point of view, and I'm sure I talk from Brian's and the rest of the team. One of the most depressing things to be asked by a member of the public is, or two things to be asked, where are the toilets and where's the exit? I don't really want to answer that question. I want to, you know, what are those alliums? Which ones are they? What's this purple flower? What's this white flower? What do you do with blah? Have you got box blight? Have you got the caterpillar? You know, that sort of thing. So, you know, that's a beautiful path to walk through now, and people are really starting to engage with it, which is fantastic. And we'll leave those alliums go to seed, and they'll just sit as these little globes, and they look beautiful. And it's hanging really well. But what you can see is these beautiful white daisies are at the front. Through that area, we put in about, over the last 2 to 3 years, maybe about 7,000 or 8,000 Winston Churchill daffodils, which are bright bright white, highly scented, and they've finished now, but now we're following it with the daisies and wildflowers, which is fantastic and exactly how this garden should look, because we've got some life in it now. So we drop off that path and then we go to there. Now this is a new path that's gone back in from here and then running out through that side, and it leads you to the rosarium. It also takes you through these cherry trees just here, which have gone in this spring, and they are mainly Japanese cherries, and they're symmetrical. So you start with Yukon, the next one's Cerula, and so on and so on and so on. And the succession of flowering should lead you in. If you stand by the first two in the line, just sort of at the bottom of this picture here, and look over your shoulder and back this way, you actually glimpse the monument. Now the monument hasn't been seen from the garden for about 40 years. And this garden is full of views that have just been lost over the years, been overplanted, things have been allowed to grow too much, it's become very enclosed. And this garden is about space. This garden is about showing off the space that you've got. You know, that sort of feeling of grandeur. Remember, this is the English Versailles. You go to Versailles, it's about wealth, dominance, and power. It's the same here. It's the same here. Anyway, so we come along to the rosarium, and what I really like about this shot is there's a little tree just about there. And down in this bottom corner is a bench, and it commemorates somebody's daughter who passed away at a very young age, and that's her tree. So they're together. So there, you know, you've got a monkey puzzle tree there, which is going to be here for the next 150, 200 years, which is a great monument. But this leads you into the rose garden. It leads you into the rosarium, as you should be. And you come along this path here, through the double gates, and into the rosarium itself. And we've done a lot of work in there. We've tidied it up and made it right back to that formality that it should have. You know, you think you've come through the wildflowers, we've come through the daffodils, we've come through this path, through all this sort of unkempt ground, and you're into formality. And that's what we're trying to do. It's that contrast we're trying to give all the time. If we click along for me, Brian. Wonderful. So this shows the rose garden in its sort of height. And I think this is the path that runs off down towards Flora. The gate's just there. And, you know, full of flower, full of life, full of growth, early 1900s, looking at its sort of peak, created in the middle 1800s for the 7th Duke, and then added to by subsequent dukes. I'd love to say when I arrived it looked like this. It didn't. The pond was filled in, the roses looked very unwell. I've never seen such a cocktail of chemicals applied to roses in my life. It was like Armageddon in there. I've never seen the like of it. So I'm not don't get me wrong, I'm not organic. I don't believe in organics that much, but putting that many chemicals onto plants, which then all flows down through the hillside and into the lake at the bottom and goes into the watercourse, cannot be right. So we're trying good husbandry. But if we click to the next one, this gives you an idea of what it looked like. The statue was filthy, unkempt, bits were broken off. There was a hole drilled in her nose for the water to run out of. And it just looked very, very, very unloved. The roses if you go in there now, most of them are planted on a mound because they've just been earthed up, manured and manured and manured, and they've rooted out into that ground, so they're not surviving. They're just not perpetuating as they should be. So the statue was sent away. We've had the pond relined. It now holds water. If we click to the next one, and there we go. So she's gone back in the center. The water no longer flows out of her nose, which is great. It flows out of the corners. And there is a Latin inscription around the base, which, you know, I'm sure you all read Latin extremely well. So when you walk out there, you can translate it. I'm not even going to try, to be perfectly honest. But we've put 4 new benches in. We've lined the paths, and there is more to do out there. We have taken out the first line of roses around the outside, which should be the next shot for me, Brian, if I've got this right. There we go. So we cleared the roses out of these outer beds. Now, this is a rosarium, so this should show off the roses that were available to the 7th Duke. There were 12 different types of roses in there. That's it. Now, many, many, many roses in there, don't get me wrong, but they were all the same. You know, so the scent was the same, the colour was near enough the same, the growth was the same. That's not what this garden is about. You know, so we took out that outer ring, dug the soil off, and by happy coincidence, we found the original clay that was put in there for the roses to grow into. Now, roses like to grow in clay. They're like wet feet and a hot head. They were trying to grow in the mulch, which gives them hot feet and hot head. Not right for roses at all. So we took them out. You can't put roses straight back in a bed because you get rose sickness. So we put some different bits and bobs in. That's stocks and bananas and yuccas and stuff to try and give it a bit of majesty, a bit of drama. And then we took that out at the end of the season, cultivate the ground. If you flick along for me, Brian. Wonderful. Now, you can't see them, but we put a lot of new roses in there, and each of those blue sticks denotes a brand new rose. There are now 45 brand new varieties around that outside edge. So you're looking at things like gallicas, bourbons, damasks, china roses, noisettes, all these roses that were available to the Duke and Dukes of the time, and different, as it were, all the way through. So you haven't got a gallica next to a gallica. You haven't got a bourbon next to a bourbon. They all flow really nicely around. And don't get me wrong, the colours are going to clash. And that's what we want. You know, what's the point if they're all comfortable? You know, it should clash. It should be a glaring sort of punch in the head, as it were, almost. Anyway, so the scent is there. The roses are about that big when they first went in, because we pruned them back. They've put about that much growth on, and they are starting to come on really, really well. And we will, this winter, we will take all the roses out of these beds, drop those beds back down, cultivate it, and then we'll leave it fallow for 12 months and probably put things like the yuccas and the bananas and the agaves and stuff like that in it. And then those roses will come back. I bought them all from David Austin. They were the only company that could supply. And when I spoke to them and said, well, I wanted, the head grower said, I'm going to come and see you. You know, he said, I'm quite concerned. I'm going to come and see you. So he came out to see me, and it was wonderful. We took a walk around, and he said, it's beautiful that you want to put these old roses in, but you do realise what you're doing, don't you? And I went, well, yes, I'm putting the old roses back in because exactly as it should be, and we're trying to perpetuate it. And he said, they're a nightmare. They get all the diseases under the sun. They don't flower. They're just a pain. Why are you trying to grow them? And the reason is because we should grow them. And if we don't grow them, then they'll be lost. You know, they grow maybe 10, 20 of these a year plants, and I bought all of them to go in there. So actually, what it does is people will come around and see these roses. They'll go, where did you get them from? David Austin. And they'll start getting asked for these plants. And that's how it should be. Otherwise, they're gone. And it's not right. So if we click along for me, Brian. So these are the sort of roses that have gone back in. There's Comte de Chambord, Ischflant, and Dupont. And so those contrasts are all the way around, and different scent all the way around. And we haven't buttered them up. So the roses have got a space about as wide as this table between them all. And we'll put a herbaceous block in between so they can't bounce off each other. They can't transmit disease through. We also try to change our husbandry. So we're trying to be very clean. We're trying to keep it very open. We're feeding well. You know, so actually in, you know, touch wood, in 2 years, we've actually reduced the amount of chemical we're using on there to almost nothing. And we're not getting the problems that we've had in the past. We're not getting the black spot. We're not getting the rust. We're not getting the downy mildew that everyone's. We're still getting aphids occasionally, but we've planted companion plants in there that encourage the beneficial insects that then eat all those. And that's exactly how we should be doing it. And it works. We're also working on the principle of digging weeds out instead of hoeing them off. For years and years, areas were just hoed. And when you hoe off bindweed, you hoe off thistles, they just come back even stronger. So Brian will back me up. And so I came in and I cut all the hoes in half and threw them in the skip and bought a load of border forks, you know, because we're gardeners. So we should be digging weeds out as it should be. So if we can click along for me, Brian. So we drop out of the rose garden, and this is the path here that comes down, and we come down to the Temple of Flora. When I arrived, the Temple of Flora had a lovely big metal fence around it, which just said, do not sit in me. And right in front of it, where that bed is, was a whacking great holly tree. So if you did sit in there, you couldn't see anything. So we felled the holly tree and cleared it away. We took the fence away. You sit in there now, you can have the view. But this Temple of Flora, the goddess of flowers, had a flower garden around it. You know, there's various descriptions of what was there. There was a dahlia garden there at one time. So we are looking at making it back. It's becoming a destination. If you think you're coming from the water terrace, you're coming through Churchill's Walk, you're coming through the Cherry Walk, you're coming through Rosarium, you're dropping down into the Temple Garden, you know, and then you go further, and all these bits are there to entice you and to pull you on even further. So this is a small stud bed in front that has some unusual bits and bobs in it, and this is part of the development of this area. The next shot should show me the next thing we've done, which is this winter. We've dropped these pots in. If you had afternoon tea or dinner in the orangery, they were in the orangery originally, and there's 4 of them, and they will mark the entrance and the exit from the temple garden, and we will fence it. to keep the deer out, because let's face it, deer like to eat all these things. So they've gone in just there, and they're concrete, so they'll be perfectly fine outside. They're equidistant off the temple, and they're perfectly spaced because we can drive our vehicles through them, which the first time I drove through, I must admit I went just to make sure I wasn't hitting them. So they're planted up, and we will plant sort of seasonal plants in them. And this next shot shows an idea of how it's going to look. This is the temple garden at Newnham Courtney. And this is what we're aiming at, so it will become a horticultural oasis in this part of the garden with the temple as the centre, stud beds in there with different unusual bits and bobs in there, which just makes it more interesting and encourages people to come down there and see more of the garden. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place. It doesn't look like that now, unfortunately, but that's the sort of style we're looking at down there. There are no images of what was down there. There's just loose descriptions. But it makes sense having the temple with a garden around it. And in that area, if we click to the next one for me, Brian, you go into the Arboretum. Now, this is what we're trying to recreate down there. So before we get to this stage, we've got to cut a lot of trees down. Simple as that. You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. This is a garden I used to look after in Surrey. And this is the Chinese Bridge Peninsula. And that's what we created by just sort of clearing and allowing the trees to proliferate. And we will get there down there. There are some beautiful, beautiful trees down there in that Arboretum, some whacking great cedars, which are immense, which we've cleared around this winter. And we will continue with that. So if you do see us cutting down trees and clearing, believe me, it's not just because we like it. There is a vision, there is a plan to it. And this is the sort of thing we're aiming at, because it should have that succession of autumn colour down through there against the sky. And you drop down through there, following some of the paths, the new paths that are going in, and we click along to, there we go. So I call this slide Let It Grow. I find cutting grass to be one of the most boring and tedious operations in the world. You cut grass for two reasons: to keep it short and make it look good. Or, there you go. Since I've arrived, we've stopped cutting the grass quite so much. We leave most of it go long. And this is the sort of thing that we recreate. And we get life in it. Now, if this was a video, it'd be humming with bees. And that's exactly as it should be in the garden. This is capability brown, and it's pure for that respect. But the beautiful thing is, A, we've got all this life in the garden again. B, we've now got time to do proper gardening instead of just maintaining and whizzing around on mowers. And also, we've halved our diesel bill by doing this, which is massive. We're pledging to go carbon neutral by 2027. So if we can do that with the diesel bill in the garden, it shows you what we can get. And also, it basically freed up about 5 members of staff who were just cutting grass, so they can come and garden, and we can start gardening things properly, which is why we get onto these projects. So down through the Arboretum and what have you, we'll see a lot more of this sort of thing. And we're seeing tway blades, helleborines, pyramid orchids, spotted orchids, bee orchids, and all sorts of unusual vetches and stuff. But with that, we're getting the sort of the strange insects, hoverflies, beneficial insects, which it gives an increase into the bird life, and so on and so on. So it all has a knock-on effect for us. So if we click for me, Brian, wonderful. Now, I'm sure you all know where this is. It's not a great slide, unfortunately, but this is a Swiss bridge below the Cascade. And just down here is an island, and you can't see it very well in that image. And it's an island we've cleared since I've arrived, and there is a bridge going onto it, and you should see through. And the reason we've cleared it, and the reason we're going onto it, and then bear in mind this bit of garden here, which is the Cascade garden, which we'll get to in a moment. If you click for me, Brian, that island had a little summer house on it. Beautiful little summer house with 2 little bridges. Rustic bridge from this side. This cedar tree is still there. It's just phenomenal. Imagine if it could talk and tell us when that went and how it looked. What have you. That'd be amazing, but it can't, unfortunately. But, lovely little rustic summer house there with a rustic bridge going across. There are people in there, and they're dressed in the finery. It could be the family having an afternoon tea. I really don't know, but that'd be lovely if it was. But there is a little bridge goes off the other side, and it takes you across the other side of the river into the Cascade garden. Incidentally, the stump for that tree is still there. So that's fantastic to go across there and poke about and see these things. As I say, being head gardener, I have a set of keys, and nobody's really making massive demands on my time. So if I choose to go and have a bit of a wander and a poke about, I can do that, which is great. I know it makes it sound like I don't do much work, but my wife will testament the state I get home in most nights. I either roll around in the dirt or I do something. If we click the next one for me, Brian. So we are going to put a little summer house back on there. Now, if you go down the zigzag path that we started at the rockery, you come across the first little fountain, and it's got 4 little statues on the corners and what have you. This is it. And this is where it was, down in the Cascade. And the 9th Duke decided he didn't like it down there, so he moved it, as you do. But the bowl is still there. And we dug it out when I arrived, one very hot August afternoon, wasn't it, Brian? So we dug it out and it still holds water. So it'd be easy to put it back. But down there, there are the most amazing little subterranean cave with water sprinkling in it. There are druid cells at the top. It's just a wonderful spot. And as you can see, it was very formal down there. It was very contrived. So, you know, that's a beautiful garden there. So when we put back a little structure on the island, we put the bridges back, we will take you people across there. And we will recreate what should be down there, because there are some amazing trees down there, some of which have fallen over and some are still going. But it's a gorgeous spot down there, and you can really feel it has a real spirit. We won't ever move the fountain back down there, but we'll put something down there to make it work. And every time we work down there, clear an area, we find something new. And it's not like it's always known that it was there, you know, but it's just been left. So it's great to go and play down there. And above the Cascade, if we click, is the rockery. Now, you can see the new rockery from that rockery above the Cascade. This was created, first of all, by Capability Brown for the 4th Duke, and then restored by Gladys. But Gladys did a lot of the restoration work on there. She extensively photographed it. She kept diaries and all sorts. And she really liked, and I say she really liked to play down there. And I think that's fantastic. You know, and the beauty is, and I was reading about it the other day, she was down there, Gladys was down there, working away on the rockery, planting and what have you, and the 9th Duke was at the top supervising the water terraces. It's a long way between them. But I don't think they got on, you know, let's face it. There's one picture of the 9th Duke down there, and he's just sort of, the look on his face just sort of says, it's not that special, is it? So it's a real shame. But Gladys was quite the plantswoman, and I know this from some of the other pictures that she took and some of the diaries and photographs. And if we click along, this next slide shows these are little greenhouses sitting on top of the plants. So these were tender plants down there. So they were quite rare, quite unusual and what have you. So Gladys was aware of that. So she had these sort of things constructed down there to cover them up and keep them protected. There's also lead labels down there. She kept diaries and what have you. So we know that it was such a spot. But as I say, you can see that from the new rockery. And the idea is that we restore that one back to exactly as close as we can make it. And they echo each other, you know, and it will look magnificent when it's finished. But it's quite a much bigger project, much bigger rocks to play with, you know, and it will look fantastic once it's done. Anyway, we click along for me, Brian. So we're coming along Lakeside Walk. We come to the grotto. This is how it looks now. It was quite enclosed by trees when I arrived, but we cleared them and felled them as part of the restoration. And the next slide shows how it looked when it was sort of in almost its heyday, I suppose. And Gladys restored this as well, I believe, and stole rocks off the rockery to redo this. Click along, there we go. And it had beds sweeping around it and a path sweeping you into it. And I actually was down there mowing and trimming and clearing the trees the one day, and I found one of the original metal labels that was down there. And I wasn't really sure where it came from. And then a lady in the palace, Alexa, said, do you want to see some of the nursery records we've got from the early 1900s? And I did. And on one of the nursery records was exactly the plant that was on the lead label. And then in the potting shed, we found a box of these lead labels. And most of the labels in the box correspond to the receipts. So we know where they were. We know they were planted around the grotto or they were planted around the rockery. So it gives us a great idea of these things to put back. And a lot of these plants are so, you know, they've been used so commonly over the years that people just don't use them anymore. So they've superseded them with new things. So we're going to put a lot of that old stuff back because it works. And, you know, it's a shame not to use them. But Lakeside Walk is fantastic. And there are a succession of paths on the hillside, which, you know, are going to be put back because we need to, because they look down on little pockets of ground, probably about the size of that table, and they're backed with stone. And they would have been planted up, so you look down on them from the path so you can truly appreciate them. But if we scroll along for me, Brian, this gives you an idea of the paths. The main path we walk on now is this one, and there are other ones up the hillside. And this plant here, if you've got it in your garden, you'll know my description of it. It is a thug, and once you've had it once, you'll never need another one. It's Hypericum calicinum, or Rose of Sharon, stands about that high. Beautiful yellow flowers, clothes the bank, holds it all together. If you want to cut it down, you can just run a mower over it and it'll just come up again. It's tough as old boots. And it is on those hillsides. And the more clearance we do on the hillsides, the more we allow it to come through. And it will hold the bank, and it's what should be there. So the new paths will go back. They are a sort of on the plan, as it were. And most things are on a 10 to 20 year plan. And we will get there with it. It's just about pushing through. If we click to the next one, it should show the boathouse. No, it doesn't, sorry. Shows Wisteria Tunnel. So I put this one in earlier today. Wisteria Tunnel, we've cleared around it because Wisterias like sunshine to grow. And trying to grow them in dense shade just didn't work. It also illustrates the bank. We've planted that bank up this year that had 5,000 wild daffodils on it. And it is helping the tunnel having a bit more light, and it flowered really, really well this year. We've got more to do down there to open it up, but it will come. It will come right. So if we click for the next one, it should show the boathouse. Now the boathouse looks magnificent there without the lean-to on it, you know. So I'm told that lean-to is to go, and the boathouse is up for restoration. But if you can see it close enough, sorry, it's such a small shot, there's pots and plants and things grown on the fence and trained on it, and that's what it is. So the family would have used it, and it is a lovely spot. So the boathouse is up for restoration. And we decorate it for events and the shoots and various bits and wobs in there. If we click to the next one for me, Brian. And the reason I've put this in here, and I should have said right at the start, whenever I do a tour of the garden or a presentation to people, I always say at the start, and I forgot this time, it is very much a garden of two halves. And the south lawn splits the garden in half. So you have the bit we've just walked around, then you come back up from there, and you've got to cut across the lawn to get to the other side. And we come across the Italian garden. So this is the early 1900s, another Quai de Chêne, the same as the water terrace. And you can just see just how fine the detail is in there. And then we scroll to the next one from Brian, it shows a bit more. And how fine the squares were on the top with the topiary and what have you. And then we click to the next picture, and it shows you how it looks sort of now. Now the hedges have all got too big. They've all started to knit in. We've lost all that definition. And to me now, it looks like office carpet. It doesn't look like the fine Persian carpet that it should be, because all the hedges have just been allowed to grow. And we've lost, you know, these topiary squares with the birds on top. They should stand proud of the hedge so you can appreciate them properly. And over time, because the hedge has been clipped, but every time you leave a bit more and leave a bit more, and it just marches gently. There's a picture from 2012, and it shows you can get 2 mowers width behind on this side. So in 12 years, that's grown out enough to block it in. So, you know, there is a lot of work to do on those hedges. There are a lot of cutting back and clearance to do. There's a lot of work to get them back. And to, you know, they should actually sit about yay high and about that wide, the hedges, so you can see over them and truly appreciate it. And the box hedges should be about that high, maybe about that wide, and they shouldn't all be flat. You should drop. You should come to a point. You should widen out and that sort of thing. You should have all that definition, but we've lost it. So we are going to have to hit them hard to get them back. Some of them will probably have to come out and we'll have to replace. You know, but that's gardening. You know, you don't always win. Click to the next one for me, Brian. So this showed what we did last year. We had 4 statues that were surplus to requirements out the orangery, and we dropped them in the middle of the Italian garden, 1 in each quarter, and they're the 4 seasons. So you come out of China Room Door, which is that one there, and you go through spring, summer, autumn, winter. And they sat very, very nicely, and they echo the conifers we put in the corners. Conifers went in because we sent the pots away to be restored. The pots have come back, and the conifers are doing really well. And the reason we haven't put them back in the beds is because when we dug them out, they were about that deep and they'd sunk. And what happens if they're in soil, they'll rot. So actually, if we put them outside, we can keep them going a bit longer. These were brought back by the 9th Duke from his honeymoon, and they're dated in 1896. and there's a date stamp on one of them, so we know when they were brought back. The statues have been taken out so they can discolour a bit because they're a bit too bright. But actually, they should be this bright in the garden. They should really be glaring and bright. A bit like the scaffolding on it all at the moment. Anyway, so if we click along for me, Brian. So one of the sort of gems of this garden, amongst the many, is the secret garden. Now, the secret garden is a beautiful little horticultural oasis tucked away on one side of the garden. Not many people find it. You know, and one of the best things is that a member of the public comes up to us and says, you know, where's the secret garden? We're not telling you that's a secret. You've got to find it, you know. I took 6 signs out for the secret garden when I arrived. That really, you know, having signs pointing you to it all the time just wasn't right. You know, you need to discover it. And it is evolving now very, very nicely into a woodland garden. It had the most amazing collection of plant labels in there, but not the plants. We've put a nice big deer fence up around it to stop the deer getting on and eating the plants. It was like a smorgasbord for them in there. So big deer fence, and we're starting to see the plants come back. We're starting to see it evolve. And so part of that evolution is to take away the metal hoop fences that were in there because they were just too industrial in there. So we've gone down the route of putting this cleft rail fencing in there. We're replacing the metal edging with stone edging, a lot more natural, a lot more in keeping. And we have got more to do in there. We are just about to finish repairing the streams so we can get the water fixed in there. When I arrived, there were signs in there saying, bear with us, something like that or whatever. We're fixing the streams. We've discovered a problem. You know, I'm paraphrasing what it said. Blah, 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 bear with us. On the bottom of the label, on the bottom of the sign, it said April 2014. I arrived in here in 2022 and it was still there. Fix it. So we are fixing it and getting it done. But what we're also showing on this picture is a brand new bed and a brand new path that's gone up there. Secret Garden had a herbaceous border in it. Probably the only herbaceous border in Blenheim. Not the right place for it at all. And it was absolutely full of perennial weed. So we've cleared it out, kept as much soil in there as we can, put a brand new path in, and we are going to create very much, it's not going to be as flashy as the one at Highgrove, but very much like a stumpery. So we'll drop some big old oak stumps in there. We'll drop some big bits of rock in there. We'll have ferns pilling over the top. We'll have tree ferns. We'll have grasses and what have you. So a lot of drama, a lot of majesty. And it'll be a nice little enclave that you can get into. And people are starting to use the secret garden as this nice little oasis, and exactly as it should be. And we've put bird tables in there, hedgehog boxes, and we're encouraging all these sort of wildlife to be in there. And we're not finding a problem with slugs and snails in there because we're encouraging the wildlife to come in there. I was at a garden in Germany last year, and I was talking to the head gardener, and I said, you don't seem to have any problem on your hostas with slugs. And he said, no. And I'm not going to try and do a German accent. And he said, yep, we have the perfect pest control for that. And I was thinking, well, you know, chemicals, people go. And then we were chatting away, and all of a sudden this duck popped its head up out of the hostas, looked at us, quacked a bit, dived back down again. And then you see it, it's moving. And these little Indian runner ducks are skipping about in the hostas eating them. And it's fantastic, you know. And he also said they taste really nice as well. Not the slugs, the ducks. So I had to ask him to clarify that one. But we are allowing it to evolve, the secret garden. We are allowing the woodland plants to spread out as they should do. And it's working very, very well. And hopefully you'll go in and have a look. If you click to the next one for me, Brian, it shows an idea of what we're getting to. This sort of dapple glade, nice colours and what have you, and a bit very, very natural. We've changed the colour of the benches in there. We've put in different benches in there. We've painted them so they show up. And it's coming really nicely in there. And things are being allowed to grow rather than being eaten. So out of the secret garden, we go on to an area called Back Road. And at the back is the Temple of Health, and an area here called the Lights. Now, we've opened the lights up this year. You can walk through it, and it will lead you from the back road right the way through to the roundel, or it will lead you from the south lawn to the temple. Incidentally, the Temple of Health and Temple of Flora and the Temple of Diana are created by the same architect designer. And if you stand in the middle of the south lawn, because we've cleared it, you can see the Temple of Health and the Temple of Diana, and they're in line. You know, that cannot be a coincidence. You know, it cannot be. You know, they didn't do things like that. Well, sorry, they didn't do things with coincidence. It was meant to be. So you can see them. So this shows the lights in early 1900. And as you can see, it's not a great picture, I'm afraid, but it was gardened. There's herbaceous plants and what have you. On the actual crisp image I've got, it shows stripes being cut down there. And they were cut with a 2-foot mower, and it was 24 inches wide each one, and it's 16 foot wide. And when you measure it out, it is. So we will get it back, and it's one of those areas. But this is an image that was taken today. The next one, that's an image from the same place, and it shows you how it would look if you imagine the one before. So we've cut back the shrubs, we've cleared back, because the laurel bushes, if you've got laurel in your garden, you know what happens. It gets big, it starts to march, and it goes forward. So we're clearing the scrub back, and eventually we'll hide the fence of the secret garden, which is just there, with choice shrubs, herbaceous, but big drifts of things, not little bits. It'll be big and bold, and it does lead you to the temple, and it crosses back the other way as well. And actually, when we've been working in there, the secret garden went further. There are paths in there. There are little sort of impressions where there were maybe ponds and what have you. So it did go further. So that's something we're going to look at for the future if you can find more information. So Temple of Health is largely ignored, largely not seen. But we're trying to make it more important, trying to make it more interesting. And one of the things we're doing is we click along for me again, Brian. So we put a lot more daffodils in the area to try and encourage people. We've cleared all the laurel from around it to stop it getting damp. And then we try and make it more interesting. Because we put Halloween in it. So you get Dracula in it, which looks great. But obviously only for Halloween. But we're trying to put things like this. Next shot for me, Brian. So we grow an awful lot of squashes and pumpkins and what have you. So as soon as Halloween's finished, we do a display in there. And the brief I give to the garden team is, there's the squashes, take as much foliage as you want, flowers and whatever around the place. And when you think you've done enough, do some more. And when you think that's enough, do some more. And then I'll come up and have a look and go, it looks fantastic, do more. And we really make it over the top. And it works really well. And that's sort of November 2024, and that lasted right through till sort of early January. And it really encourages people to go and see it, which is what we want. We also grow a lot of dahlias in part of the garden. And if you click to the next one for me, Brian, this shows a sort of much reduced sort of display. We did this for somebody's wedding last year. And then we left the dahlias in there, and it just, it's a bit more interesting. We are seeing a lot more people interacting with it, taking photos and enjoying it. I enjoy doing it. I know Brian goes and does some of the displays in there, and it gives us a chance to explore another part of horticulture, which was traditionally always something gardeners would do. If we click to the next one for me, Brian, there we go. So we come down to Bothy Pond, which is at the back of the roundel, largely ignored pond, purely because most people didn't really know it was there. Most people were making their way to the wall garden. And there was a lovely little summer house, which you can see just there. So we've cleared around the pond. We've put a fountain in, which should be the next shot for me. And we will put a summer house back. The summer house will go on this crazy paving just here, looking out across the pond. It's deep. It smells bad. I can say this because I've paddled about in it. But once we put the fountain in, all of a sudden it just came to life, and people were starting to use it. So the idea is to put the summer house back and also create a garden around it. And as part of that, we've had to stabilise the bank, which should be this next shot for me. So we've put in sweet chestnut posts and birch faggots, which will rot down over time. We've filled it in with topsoil, and we'll plant around it, and those plants will hold the soil as the birch faggots rot down and give us that spill into the water. And we've backed it with stone as well, because believe it or not, it's full of crayfish which burrow into the bank, which causes problems. So that's what we're at to now. The fountain's gone back in, and eventually we'll create a garden around that pond, as it were, which should be this next shot. Now, I can't remember whose feet they are, so I apologise. I think it's a friend of mine, but I can't remember. My wife asked me if I can identify, and I said if I could identify her legs, then I think I'm probably not going to be married much longer. But this is what we're going to do. We will create a jungle around there. You will walk through plants. You'll be dripped on by foliage. We'll have gunneras, we'll have hedychiums, we'll have decasias, we'll have all these great acanthopanax and all sorts of stuff in there. And it will be a sort of enclave that you sort of scoot around and sit on the benches and enjoy the view across the pond. Very much like the secret garden. It'll become another oasis, another sort of away from the heat, away from the sort of crowds, as it were, which is what we want down in that part of the garden to give it some life. So that's probably at least a 5-year project. We've made a start on it by stabilising the bank. We'll probably look at constructing the summer house next, and then we'll start creating the borders this winter. Click to the next one for me, Brian. There we go. And the roundels at the back of that, which is this area just here. The main path that people take is that one. And we planted the roundel up with daffodils for this season. And those daffodils will come out and we'll plant those in the grassland. And we're trying to control the perennial weed in that area. So that's why we keep changing the plants in there. It gives us a chance to dig those out. It then gives us a chance to cultivate it and get the weed out and what have you. But all the hedges were up here when I arrived. And the idea was if we scoop them down towards the centre, the eye is led and people walk through it and people are starting to use it, which is great to see. Yeah, we scroll to the next one for me, Brian. Right, from there, we're going to jump into the wall garden. And I'm nearly at the end. You're all going to sleep there, I can see. But this is looking from Chambers Gate from the top end in the early 1920s. And just look how crisp and formal that is. This is how it should look. This wall garden is about control. This is about providing food and what have you. And it's in that enclosed area. So if we click to the next one for me, this should be an overhead shot of how it looks in about March of this year. We have a no-dig allotment and there and there. And then we've got a potato patch just here. And then this is our sort of stock bed for trees and shrubs for the landscape. There's an orchard just up there. And eventually that bit will become a toy vineyard. I say a toy vineyard, it'll have about maybe 600 or 700 plants in it, no more. And the idea is we're going to have a bigger vineyard on the wider estate. And that's like the shop window for it, because not everyone's going to get to that bit. But the idea is we say, come and buy a bottle of wine. And it gives you an idea of the sort of productive area that we've got, which is the back of house. We cleared out that pond, and that collects all the water from those greenhouses, which we can then use to water the garden. It was filled in quite a few years ago for health and safety reasons, and we will eventually put another pond or a pond in that bit. So there'll be 3 ponds in there. There are only ever 2. But we will put another one back in there because we get a phenomenal amount of rain. And we should try and collect it as much as possible. So click to the next one for me, Brian. There we go. In the orchard, trying to encourage the bees and what have you, we've put some hives up on stilts. And Philippe, who some of you may have heard a talk by earlier this year, he deals with those sort of bits and bobs. And we've got bees in it already, which is great because they're there, they'll pollinate the apples, they'll pollinate the fruit and veg and what have you in the area, which is superb. Click for the next one. There we go. This is some of the garden team earthing up the potatoes. This potato plough sat in the museum and it works like an absolute treat, which is great. You just tie it to a tractor, pull it to either end and just pull it through and it just tips the soil on top. It's fantastic earthing up the potatoes. When you've got nearly 1/3 of an acre, it's much better to have a machine to do it with rather than a spade. That was done in what? 2 mornings? Something like that, which is fantastic. So if we click to the next one for me, Brian. So that'll be the new pond that's going in. Controversially, it's going to be a square rather than a circle. I know it's controversial. There's a very good reason for that. It's much, much cheaper to build a square pond than a round pond and much, much easier to make it waterproof. So it will collect water coming in and then we can reuse it for irrigation, which is perfect for us. Click to the next one for me, Brian. Grand. Now, it's a small shot, I'm afraid, but I know you've all been in this part of the garden, if you've been around, and you've been in the butterfly house. This is the orchid house, and it's now the butterfly house. Previous dukes had orchid collections. And when the last orchid collection was sold, which I believe belonged to the 9th Duke, it had some 400,000 plants in it. Phenomenal amount of plants. But if you've got orchids at home, you know full well that it'll flower its heart out for about 8 months. Then it'll sit on the windowsill or wherever you keep it looking grumpy and sulky and not flowering. If you've got a palace and you want flowers in all the rooms, you need a lot of plants. Hence why 400,000 plants. But if we click to the next one, This is the orchid house now, the butterfly house. So all those raised beds were running through the centre as it was. And I've never looked after a butterfly house. So it's great fun. It really is, and blows my mind every time I go in there, which is super. But we're changing how it is in there. We're changing the fruit. We're using things like bananas, papayas, plantains, dragon fruit, all these plants, fruit that they would have had. Because when I arrived, we were putting apples and pears in there. These butterflies are from South America. They have no idea what an apple and pear is, you know? So let's use something they're used to. So it helps to keep them going a bit longer. So outside the butterfly house, which is just there, is the potager garden, which was the lavender garden. A lot more daffodils gone in there, and it gives you an idea of the cherry trees outside. That's where most of our dahlias go. And we pack it with the dahlias. We probably buy 50 or 60 different varieties every year to go in there, and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's beautiful in there. And the cherries just look magnificent. Anyway, I think we might be on nearly the last one, Brian, if you click along. Fab, right. These are the people, apart from Brian as well, because I think he's on there somewhere. These are the people that look after that garden out there. They were planting bulbs. It's November 2024. I was on holiday. I think I was lying on the beach. It was about 27 degrees. It was gorgeous. And they sent me this picture. It's chucking it down with rain, and they're planting bulbs. You know, and you know, these people go out there and manage that garden and get on with it. And you know, hats off to them. You know, this is not the only photo they sent me. This is the cleanest photo they sent me. But you know, these are some of the garden team. There are 16 of us, 7 of which are full-time, some of which have been here over 30 years. You know, and this place gets under your skin. And you know, that encapsulates it for me. Happy little bunch. So I've run out of pictures to show you, and I think I've probably talked you all into silence. No worries, thank you.